The station floated in the darkness between three dying stars. It was old. Older than most civilizations. Older than some galaxies. The beings who built it had turned to dust long ago, but their creation remained, waiting for moments like this. Elena Vasquez stood at the viewing window of the human shuttle, watching the station grow larger. Her oxygen mask hissed softly with each breath. Her cane clicked against the metal floor as she shifted her weight. She was 67 years old, and her body reminded her of this fact every single day. "Ambassador," said Captain Torres behind her. "Are you sure about this? The atmosphere in there is not meant for humans." Elena smiled without turning around. "Nothing out here is meant for humans, Captain. That's never stopped us before." The shuttle docked with a gentle shudder. Elena gathered her things. A small bag, a tablet with her notes, a photograph of her family, worn soft at the edges from years of touching. She did not know if she would return to the shuttle. She had made peace with that possibility long ago. The airlock opened, and Elena stepped into the conclave of eternity. The main chamber was vast beyond human understanding. The ceiling stretched upward until it disappeared into darkness. The floor was made of something that looked like black glass but felt warm under her feet. Lights floated in the air without any visible source, casting strange shadows that moved on their own. And the beings. The beings. Elena had studied them for 30 years. She had seen images, read reports, watched recordings. Nothing had prepared her for the reality that the Vethkari stood in clusters near the far wall. They were made of living crystal, their bodies catching the light and splitting it into rainbows. They thought in centuries. A single conversation with a Vethkari could take 10 human years to complete. They were beautiful and terrifying. The pale architects moved through the crowd like ghosts. They were tall and thin, their skin the color of old bone. They had been building structures in space when humanity's ancestors were learning to walk upright. They had constructed the first shells around stars. They had shaped nebulae into art. And then there were the Dromatheks. Elena felt the Dromatheks before she saw it. A pressure in her mind. A weight on her soul. She looked up and saw a portion of the ceiling that was darker than the rest. It moved. It breathed. It was alive. The Dromathex Prime, a being the size of a small moon, compressed into a form that could fit inside the station. It was made of gas and dust, and the corpses of planets it had consumed. It was older than Earth's sun. Elena walked forward. Her cane clicked on the glass floor. Every being in the chamber turned to look at her. The silence was absolute. A Vethkari moved toward her. Its crystal body chimed softly as it walked. When it spoke, its voice was like wind through broken glass. "You are the human representative." It was not a question. "I am," Elena said. Her voice was thin in the strange air, but she did not let it waver. "I am Ambassador Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Coalition." The Vethkari studied her. Its eyes were facets of pure light. "You are small. Yes, you are dying." Elena felt the truth of this in her bones, in the weakness of her legs, in the rattle of her lungs. "Yes," she said again. "I am. Why did your species send us there dying?" Before Elena could answer, the darkness above her moved. The Dromathex Prime was manifesting. A tendril of living shadow descended from the ceiling, forming something that might have been a face. When it spoke, the words bypassed Elena's ears entirely and appeared directly in her mind. "Why do you send yous? You're dying." Is this menace insult or jest? Elena looked up at the being that could crush planets with a thought. She felt no fear. She had buried 2 husbands. She had held her daughter as she died from the plague on Kepler Station. She had watched her son's ship disappear into a black hole during the war. She had faced worse than this thing. She had faced loss. "I am here," Elena said, "because I asked to be. Because someone needed to come." And I volunteered. The other species send their strongest, their wisest, their most powerful. Humanity sends a broken old female who cannot even breathe without assistance. Yes, Elena said. They do, and here I am. A sound rippled through the chamber. It took Elena a moment to realize it was laughter. The ascended species were laughing at her, at humanity, at the broken old woman who dared to stand among gods. Elena said nothing. She only listened, and remembered. A pale architect approached her. This one was younger than the others. Elena could tell by the way it moved, uncertain and curious. It leaned down to study her with eyes that had watched stars being born. "You are fascinating," it said. "So brief. So fragile. How do you bear it?" "Bear what?" "Knowing. Knowing that you will end. That everything you do will be forgotten. That your species is a mayfly compared to us." Elena looked at the young architect. She thought of her daughter's laugh, her first husband's hands, her son's terrible jokes. She thought of the photograph in her bag, worn soft from touching. "We bear it," she said, "because we have no choice, and because it makes every moment matter." The architect tilted its head, confused. A chime rang through the chamber. The conclave was being called to order. The ascended beings moved toward a great circular platform in the center of the room. Elena followed, her cane clicking, her oxygen hissing. Her heart beating. The eldest Vethkari rose above the platform, its crystal body blazing with light. "We have gathered," it announced, "because something approaches. Something that has made us afraid." A murmur passed through the crowd. Elena watched. The ascended species, beings who had lived for millions of years, beings who could reshape reality with a thought. They were scared. "The hollow is coming," the Vethkari continued. "It will reach the galactic core in 200 years. When it does, everything will end." The chamber erupted. Voices overlapped. Arguments began. The Dromathex Prime roared in confusion and anger. Elena stood in the chaos, small and frail and dying. She watched the gods panic, and she began to think. 3 days passed on the station. 3 days of arguments and fear and plans that went nowhere. Elena attended every session. She sat in the back of the chamber, small and quiet, watching the ascended beings tear at each other with words and thoughts, and sometimes with force. Her oxygen tank needed refilling twice. Her legs ached so badly that she could barely walk by the end of each day. But she kept coming. She kept listening. The hollow. That was all anyone talked about. It was an entity from outside the observable universe. It existed in dimensions that even the ascended could not fully perceive. Their greatest weapons passed through it like light through water. Their most advanced sensors could only see fragments of its true form. It was coming, and nothing could stop it. The Vethkari proposed running. They wanted to gather the ascended species and flee to another galaxy, leaving everything else behind. "Let the younger races die," they said. "Let the hollow consume the Milky Way. They would survive." That was what mattered. The Pale Architects had a different idea. They wanted to collapse the galactic core into a black hole. The hollow seemed drawn to the center of the galaxy. Perhaps, if there was nothing there, it would leave. Of course, this would destroy half the galaxy in the process. Billions of inhabited worlds. Trillions of lives. But the architects had never cared much about younger species. The Dromathex wanted to do nothing. Perhaps the hollow would spare those who did not resist. Perhaps it would pass by like a storm. Perhaps they could hide. Elena listened to all of this. She said nothing. On the second day, she raised her hand. She requested permission to address the conclave. The eldest Vethkari looked at her with something like amusement. "The human wishes to speak." Laughter rippled through the chamber. What wisdom could a mayfly offer to gods? Someone asked. Perhaps she wants to tell us how to die, another voice said. Her species has much experience with that. The laughter grew louder. Elena lowered her hand and sat back down. Her face showed nothing. Her heart was steady. She would try again tomorrow. On the third day. During a break in the arguments, the young pale architect approached her. Elena had noticed it watching her throughout the sessions. It moved differently than the others. There was curiosity in its ancient eyes. You are still here, it said. Double quotes. Yes. Most beings would have left by now. The contempt directed at you has been considerable. Elena shrugged. Her shoulders hurt when she did it, but she did it anyway. I've experienced worse. The architect sat beside her. It was strange, seeing something so tall fold itself down to her level. May I ask you a question? You may. Your species fascinates me. You know you will die. Truly die, permanently. Not transform. Not transcend. Not continue in any form. You simply end. The architect paused. Yet, you continue. You build things. You create art. You form bonds with each other, knowing those bonds will be broken. Why do you not simply despair? Elena was quiet for a long moment. She thought about her life, the joys and the sorrows, the loves and the losses. Because we've always known we would die, she said finally. We've had practice at living anyway. The architect considered this. Its bone-white face was impossible to read. I have lived for 11 million years, it said. I have watched species rise and fall. I have seen stars born and die. But I do not understand what you just said. I know, Elena said. That's the problem. The architect tilted its head. What do you mean? Before Elena could answer, the chime sounded. The session was resuming. The architect rose and glided away, but it looked back at her once before rejoining its kind. Elena stayed in her seat. She watched the arguments continue. She watched the fear grow. That night, in her small quarters aboard the human shuttle, Elena looked at the photograph of her family. Her first husband, David, killed in the Luna mining disaster. Her second husband, Marcus, lost to cancer. Her daughter, Sophia, dead in the Kepler station plague. Her son, Miguel, swallowed by a black hole during the war. She had outlived them all. Not because she was stronger. Not because she was better. Just because her body, broken as it was, had kept going when theirs had not. Sometimes she hated her heart for continuing to beat. Sometimes she was grateful for every breath. Both feelings were true. Both feelings were human. She pressed the photograph to her chest and closed her eyes. Tomorrow she would try again. She would keep trying until they listened or until her body finally gave out. On the morning of the fourth day, Elena made her way to the restricted section of the station. The archives. The place where the Ascended kept their oldest secrets. The doors were sealed. Only Ascended beings could enter. But the young pale architect was waiting for her. I have been thinking about what you said, it told her. About having practice at living anyway. I still do not understand. But I want to. Elena looked at the sealed doors. Then she looked at the architect. There are records in there, she said. Old records. About the hollow. About what happened the last time it came. The architect's eyes widened. The last time? 7 billion years ago. Before your species existed. Before most of the current Ascended existed. The hollow came before, and something drove it back. Elena paused. I need to know what. The archives are forbidden to outsiders. I know. The architect was silent for a long time. Elena waited. She was good at waiting. Humans had to be. Finally, the architect moved toward the doors. It pressed its hand against the seal. The doors opened. I will help you, it said. "But I do not know what we will find." Elena smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was real. "Neither do I, that's why we have to look." She stepped into the darkness of the archives, the architect beside her. Behind them, the doors sealed shut. The archives were cold and dark and endless. Elena moved through corridors that stretched beyond sight. The young architect walked beside her, its body casting a pale glow that pushed back the shadows. Data crystals lined the walls, each one containing more information than all of human civilization had ever produced. "I have never been here before," the architect admitted. "It is forbidden to those under 1 billion years of age." "How old are you?" 800 million years. Elena almost laughed. 800 million years old, and still considered young. Still curious. Still willing to break rules to find answers. She had started calling the architect Pallid in her mind. It was easier than trying to pronounce its true name, which existed partly in sounds humans could not make, and partly in mathematical concepts humans could not think. "What are we looking for?" Pallid asked. "Records from 7 billion years ago. From the last time the Hollow came." Pallid stopped walking. "The Hollow has come before?" "I think so. There are references in some of the older texts. Fragments, hints, but nothing complete." Elena kept moving forward. Her legs were screaming in pain. Her oxygen tank was running low. She did not stop. The ascended who knew the truth are gone now, dead or transcended. But they left records. They must have. They searched for hours. Pallid accessed data crystals that contained the memories of species long extinct. Elena used her tablet to cross-reference and translate, pulling together pieces from 17 different archive systems. The work was slow and painful. The archives were not designed for human use. The information was scattered, fragmented, corrupted by time. But Elena kept going. She had spent her entire career doing this kind of work, finding patterns in chaos, making connections that others missed. That was the human gift. Not strength, not speed, not longevity. Humans were good at seeing patterns, good at making leaps of intuition, good at refusing to give up. Finally, in the deepest part of the archives, they found it, a record from the first age of the galaxy. Before the Vethkari, before the Pale Architects, before the Dromatheks. A record left by beings so old that even their name had been forgotten. Elena projected the record onto the wall. It was damaged, incomplete, but readable. The Hollow came, she translated slowly. It consumed everything in its path. 3 galaxies fell before its advance. All seemed lost. Pallid leaned forward, its ancient eyes fixed on the projection. What stopped it? Elena kept reading. A naming. A recognition. One who was small enough to see what the great could not. One who was mortal enough to understand what the eternal had forgotten. What does that mean? Elena shook her head. The record became fragmentary here. Words missing. Concepts lost. But she kept piecing it together, using human intuition to fill in the gaps. "The Hollow is not mindless," she said finally. "It's not a force of nature. It's aware. It thinks. It feels impossible. Our sensors have detected no signs of intelligence. Your sensors are designed by immortal beings to detect immortal minds. You're looking for the wrong things." Elena's hands were shaking as she worked. From exhaustion, from excitement, from the weight of what she was discovering. The Hollow is intelligent, but its intelligence is different. It exists in dimensions you cannot perceive. It thinks in ways you cannot understand. And this naming? This recognition? Elena was quiet for a long moment. She stared at the fragmented record, her mind working, her heart racing. Like all aware things, she said slowly, it has a name. A true name. A name that describes what it really is. And if someone speaks that name, if someone truly understands what the hollow is and puts that understanding into words, she trailed off. Pallid waited. The name is not in any ascended language, Elena continued. It can't be, because the ascended have never truly faced oblivion. You live for millions of years, billions. You transcend death. You have never looked into the void of personal extinction and continued speaking anyway. But humans have, every single day. Elena looked at Pallid with tired, determined eyes. We know we're going to die. Really die. End completely. And we get up every morning anyway. We fall in love knowing it will end. We build things knowing they will crumble. We hope even though we know there are no guarantees. She turned back to the record. That's what the hollow needs. That's what will stop it. Someone who understands true mortality. Someone who can put into words what it means to be finite and temporary and still choose to exist. And you believe you can do this? Elena laughed. It was a dry, tired sound. I have no idea, but I'm going to try. Her oxygen alarm beeped. The tank was nearly empty. Her legs could barely hold her weight. Her hands were trembling so badly she could barely operate her tablet. We should return, Pallid said. You need rest. There's no time for rest. Elena gathered her notes, her fragments, her pieces of the puzzle. The Conclave is deciding what to do tomorrow. They're going to choose running or destruction or surrender. I need to give them another option. They will not listen to you. They have made that clear. Then I'll make them listen. Pallid studied her with ancient eyes. Why do you care so much? Even if you succeed, you will be dead soon. Your species is young and weak. What does it matter to you what happens to the galaxy? Elena thought about her family, her lost loves, her dead children. She thought about all the humans who would never exist if the hollow consumed everything. All the first steps and first words and first kisses that would never happen. It matters because I say it does, she said. It matters because I choose for it to matter. Pallid was silent. Elena walked out of the archives, her cane clicking, her body failing, her spirit burning. Behind her, the pale architect followed. It did not understand what it had witnessed, but it was beginning to. The news came at dawn. The hollow had accelerated. It was no longer 200 years away. It would arrive in decades. Maybe less. The conclave erupted into chaos. Elena stood at the edge of the great chamber, watching the gods panic. The Vethkari were screaming at each other in frequencies that shattered lesser crystals. The pale architects were arguing in mathematical equations that made reality bend around them. The Dromathex Prime had expanded to fill half the ceiling, its darkness pressing down on everyone below. Ancient alliances were breaking. Species that had cooperated for millions of years were turning on each other. Someone had suggested sacrificing the younger races to slow the hollow down. Someone else had proposed using the energy of living stars as a weapon, even though it would kill billions. Fear made monsters of everyone. Even gods. Elena watched it all. Her body was failing. She had not slept in 2 days. Her oxygen was running low again, and she had refused to return to the shuttle for more. There was no time. She had spent the night preparing, going over her notes, practicing the words, trying to make her old, tired mind hold everything she had learned. The name was not a simple thing. It was not a word you could just say. It was a concept, a feeling, a truth that had to be understood before it could be spoken. Elena had spent her whole life preparing for this moment without knowing it. Every loss, every grief, every time she had chosen to keep going when giving up, would have been easier. All of it had led her here. She began walking toward the central platform. Her cane clicked on the floor. Her oxygen hissed. The ascended beings did not notice her at first. She was too small, too insignificant. But Pallet noticed. The young architect moved through the crowd, clearing a path for her without seeming to. Other architects glanced at it with confusion, but they stepped aside. Elena climbed onto the platform. Her legs nearly gave out. She caught herself on her cane and stood straight. "I wish to address the conclave," she said. Her voice was thin, weak. It barely carried past the edge of the platform. The eldest Vethkari turned to look at her. "The human speaks? Now? In the hour of our destruction?" "Let her talk," someone laughed. "Perhaps she will tell us how to die with dignity. Her species does it often enough." More laughter, bitter and afraid. Elena did not wait for permission. She began to speak. "You call yourselves ascended," she said. Her voice was stronger now. She was not sure where the strength came from. "You have lived for millions of years. Billions. You have built wonders that my species cannot even imagine. You have reshaped stars and planets and the fabric of reality itself." The laughter faded. The ascended were listening now, if only out of curiosity. "But you have ascended past something important," Elena continued. "You have forgotten what it means to be small, to be temporary, to know that the darkness is coming and to light a candle anyway." The Dromathex Prime's darkness shifted above her. Its voice crashed into her mind like a wave. "You dare lecture us, Mayfly? You who will be dust before our youngest reaches maturity. You who cannot even survive without machines to help you breathe." "Yes," Elena said. "I dare. Because I know something you don't." The chamber went silent. "The Hollow has come before," Elena said. 7 billion years ago. It destroyed 3 galaxies. Everything seemed lost. But something stopped it. Something that the Ascended of that age understood, but you have forgotten. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The Hollow is not mindless. It is not a force of nature. It is aware. It thinks. It feels. And like all aware things, it has a name. The eldest Vethkari's crystal body flickered. "A name? You believe you can speak the name of something that exists in dimensions we cannot perceive?" "Yes, because the name is not in your languages. It cannot be. You have never developed words for certain concepts. You have never needed them." Elena looked out at the assembled gods. "You have never truly faced oblivion. You have never stared into the void of personal extinction and continued speaking anyway. But I have. Every human has. Every single day of our short, fragile lives." She closed her eyes. She thought of David, her first love, crushed under falling rock. She thought of Marcus, wasting away in a hospital bed, still telling her jokes until the very end. She thought of Sophia, burning with fever, telling her mother not to cry. She thought of Miguel, sending one last message before his ship crossed the event horizon. She thought of every human who had ever lived. Every human who had loved and lost and kept going. Every human who had built something knowing it would crumble. Who had hoped knowing there were no guarantees. Who had chosen to exist even though existence always ended in pain. And she understood. She opened her mouth. She spoke the name of the hollow dot. It was not a word. It was not a sound. It was a truth given voice. It was the defiance of entropy. The rage against the dying of the light. The love that persists knowing it will end. The hope that exists without guarantee. It was the answer to a question that the universe itself had been asking since the first star was born. Does it matter? The station shuddered. Reality rippled. The lights flickered and failed and came back on in. Colors that had no names. The Dromathex Prime screamed. The Vethkari shattered into fragments and reformed. The Pale Architects fell to their knees. And across the galaxy, every sensor designed to track the hollow registered something unprecedented. It stopped. It turned. It listened. Elena collapsed on the platform. Her cane clattered away. Her oxygen mask had come loose. She could not breathe. She could not move, but she could see. She saw the darkness above her change. She saw the hollow respond to the name she had spoken. It did not respond with destruction. It responded with a question. The question filled her mind, filled the station, filled the space between stars. It was the same question it had been asking across 1,000 universes. The same question that had driven it to unmake everything in its path. Does it matter? Elena smiled. Blood was on her lips. Her heart was stuttering, but she had an answer. Yes, she whispered. Yes, it does. And then she was gone. Not dead. Not yet. Just elsewhere. The hollow had taken her somewhere to hear the rest of her answer. The conclave chamber was silent. The gods stared at the empty platform where the frail old human had stood. No one was laughing anymore. Elena opened her eyes to darkness. Not darkness. Something else. A space that existed between dimensions, between thoughts, between heartbeats. She was floating in a void that was not empty. It was full of something too vast for her human mind to comprehend. The hollow was here, all around her, inside her, watching her with attention that had destroyed galaxies. Elena was not afraid. She should have been. Any sane person would have been. But she had spent her whole life facing things that should have broken her. Loss after loss after loss. And she was still here. Still standing. Still speaking. Hello, she said. The hollow did not respond with words. It responded with images, feelings, memories that were not her own. She saw universes being born and dying. She saw civilizations rise and fall across timescales that made her human life seem like a single breath. She saw the hollow traveling between realities, searching, always searching, for something it had lost so long ago that it barely remembered what it was. She saw loneliness. Endless, crushing loneliness. The loneliness of being the only thing of your kind in existence. The loneliness of being so vast and so different that nothing could understand you. The ascended beings it had encountered were too powerful, too eternal. They registered to the hollow as background noise. Complex patterns, but patterns without meaning. Static. But Elena burned. She was small and frail and dying, but she was alive in a way the immortals had forgotten how to be. Her grief was real. Her love was real. Her stubborn, stupid, beautiful hope was real. The hollow had been asking its question across 1,000 universes, and no one had ever answered. No one had ever understood what it was asking. Until now. You've been alone for so long, Elena said. Her voice should not have worked here, in this space between spaces. But the hollow heard her. So long that you forgot what you were looking for. You just kept moving, kept consuming, hoping that somewhere, somehow, you would find something that mattered. The hollow's attention sharpened. The pressure of its focus increased. Elena felt like she was being seen for the first time in her life. Truly seen. Every part of her. Every loss. Every joy. Every moment she had chosen to keep going when giving up would have been easier. You want to know if it matters, she said. If any of it matters? When everything ends, when everything is forgotten, when even the last star burns out and the universe goes cold and dark forever. Does any of it matter that we existed at all? The hollow waited. It had destroyed civilizations waiting for this answer. It had unmade galaxies in its desperate search for someone who could understand the question. Elena thought about her life. Her short, fragile human life. She thought about David, who had made her laugh. Marcus, who had made her feel safe. Sophia, who had made her proud. Miguel, who had made her believe in tomorrow. They were all gone now. Dust and memory. And she would join them soon. She could feel her body failing, somewhere far away, but she had loved them. She still loved them. And that love had not died when they did. It was still here, inside her, burning as bright as ever. Yes, Elena said. It matters. The hollow did not understand. She could feel its confusion, its desperate need to comprehend what she was saying. The universe does not care, Elena continued. You're right about that. The stars don't care. The void doesn't care. When the last proton decays and time itself loses meaning, there will be nothing left to remember any of us. The hollow's pain washed over her. Ancient pain. Infinite pain. The pain of a being that had traveled for eons, searching for meaning, finding only emptiness. But we care, Elena said. We look up at the cold and caring universe, and we choose to care anyway. We build things that will crumble. We love people who will die. We hope even though there are no guarantees. And that caring, that defiance, that stubborn refusal to accept meaninglessness, that's not weakness. That's not foolishness. That's the only thing that has ever been real. She reached out into the darkness. She could not touch the hollow. It was too vast, too different. But she reached out anyway. You asked the wrong question, she said. You asked, does it matter, as if the universe would answer you. But the universe doesn't decide what matters. We do. You do. The meaning of existence is not something you find. It's something you create. The hollow was silent. Elena could feel it thinking, processing, trying to understand a concept it had never encountered before. You're lonely, she said. You've been lonely for so long. But you don't have to be. You don't have to keep wandering between universes, consuming everything in your path, hoping to find meaning in destruction. You can choose to stay. You can choose to be part of this universe instead of something outside it. You can choose to care. Something changed. Elena felt it in her bones, in her soul, in the strange space between spaces where she was floating. The hollow was changing, transforming, becoming something new. It was not leaving. It was not destroying. It was settling, integrating, becoming part of the cosmos instead of something outside it. And as it changed, Elena felt herself fading. Her body had given out. Her time was over. But she did not mind. She had done what she came to do. She had answered a question that spanned universes. She had reminded the gods that there is strength in being small, in being temporary, in being mortal. Thank you, the hollow said. It was the first time it had ever spoken in words. Thank you for answering. Elena smiled. Thank you for listening. And then she was gone. 3 months later, the conclave gathered again. Not to plan for destruction, not to flee, but to remember. Elena Vasquez had died in her shuttle, peacefully, surrounded by the data tablets she had used to save a galaxy. Her body had been returned to Earth, where she was buried beside her husbands and her children. But her legacy lived on. The Pale architects carved her name into neutron stars. The Vethkari composed a crystal symphony in her honor that would play for 10 million years. Even the Dromathex Prime, humbled for the first time in its existence, contributed to the memorial. Pallid, the young architect who had helped her, spoke at the ceremony. She was frail, Pallid said. She was dying. She could not survive in environments we consider comfortable. By every measure we use to judge worth, she was insignificant. The ascended beings listened in silence. But she was wrong about one thing, Pallid continued. She said humans have had practice at living anyway. As if this was a small thing. As if this was ordinary. The architect paused. It is not ordinary. It is extraordinary. It is the most extraordinary thing I've ever witnessed. The memorial ended. The ascended beings returned to their ancient tasks. The galaxy continued to turn, but something had changed. Across the cosmos, the younger species looked up at the stars with new pride. They had always been told they were weak, fragile, temporary. But one of their own had spoken to the darkness itself, and the darkness had listened. One of their own had answered the oldest question in existence. Does it matter? Yes, it does, because we say it does, and that, in the end, is enough.